Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. Today on Just Make It, I want to use up some of this. This is an awful lot of 1/4-inch hardwood plywood I got from a very good friend of mine. He had a project he did for a client and ended up with a fair amount of offcuts and gave me very generously a whole pile of it. He doesn't really do much work with 1/4-inch in general, and it was just taking up room in his shop, and like I said, I was more than happy to get it. I also don't really have a whole lot of use for it, but I have been doing a lot of projects recently using 1/4-inch with some rabbet joints, and that's what I'm going to do today. I am going to put together a larger than I would normally do desktop organizer to try out a few more techniques and see what kind of limits I can push this to. And like I said, the shell is going to be out of 1/4-inch and put together with rabbet joints. In part 2, I will put together the drawers. They're going to be done in acrylic, and I'm going to show you a couple other projects that I have done recently using similar techniques, but obviously with smaller attempts at it, and we'll do a lot of comparison of it. Now, one of the reasons for some of the dimensions here is I want this to fit in my acrylic workstation. It's going to actually sit on top of it for the most time, but if I'm going to need all the space of the entire top, I am going to be able to slide this inside where the drawers are. So this is going to take a part of that. So that was some of the decision making for that. And the other thing is I don't want to have a whole pile of offcuts of my offcuts. So this is also going to be a little bit deeper than I would normally make it because, well, I wanted to fit, exactly into that already made desk, but if it hangs out an extra 1/2 inch, it's no big deal. And like I said, I don't want a bunch of 1/2 inch offcuts, so I want to be economical with this. Even though I didn't pay for it, I don't want to go wasting wood for no reason at all. Now, the other thing I'm doing here that's a little bit different than normal is I'm setting up the blade and my stop for this using a set square. I actually prefer that. You're going to see both techniques being used here, but I find the set square, once it's set, it is fine. All I do is now just, if I have to change the blade, I can just simply reset it up without having any issues with it, and I get really nice, as you can see here, joints with it. So I'm very happy with that. You're going to see both techniques, as you can see right here now. I am testing them both out just to see what kind of variability there is. The set square is much more rigid, of course, and I think I prefer it. But again, either technique will work. And the other thing you'll notice is I am going to be rather extensively using an offcut off of the first cuts I did. This is just a little bit too small for me to use in the actual project itself, but I find it really valuable to make test cuts and test things out using a simple little piece like this and running it through the saw, making sure everything is exactly where I want it to, because as I said earlier in this is going to be a little bit larger project than I normally do, which means if I mess up on one of the cuts, I'm going to end up with it not being nice and square, and I really do want it to turn out nice and square. So there's a test piece on top, and I marked out where the holes are going to be for the actual panel I'm going to use. You see it's actually quite large, and I want to, like I said, I want to make sure everything's laid out the way I want it to before I get to the project itself and start doing the real cuts. So this is going to be the bottom, or the top, doesn't really matter, and I made it so that it was a mirror image, so all I had to do is flip the piece, and that way I don't have to do any additional markups for at least this one here. I can just simply put it down and cut both, and you can see there's going to be 3 lines of drawers for that. And actually, you can see here I switched back over to using the set square, and it is much simpler. I do really like it. It lines up on the blade, and I just have to move the stop over to it and clamp it down. I am going to be, as I said, I think in a few videos already, making another crosscut sled like this. I really do like them. I prefer using them that way. But for the moment, I'm quite happy with this. It cuts square. I mean, that's the most important thing. And after all what I've just said about trying to make this without using up any extra wood or anything else as proper as possible. What I'm doing here right now is realizing that I made a goof. I made it so that there are 4-inch drawers and 3-inch drawers, so I can alternate them. So I could, when I do the rabbets on the 2 internal ones, I can just turn it over and cut those rabbets and have well, drawers that are going to be in slightly different orientation, because it'll be, instead of being 4-3, 4-3, it'll be 3-4, 3-4. But because they both add up to 7, I can't cut the middle drawer, because I would end up cutting right through the whole wood. No matter how I refinagled it or whatever, it would still end up being cutting through the wood. There's just no way of doing it. I didn't want to make a different size drawer for the middle one. So it's just going to be, as you can see here, a much larger drawer, or possibly a shelf. I'm not sure yet. I haven't got to that point yet, in that, at least in the decision here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to dry fit everything. I'm just going to make sure everything fits properly, slide things in and out, make sure everything's proper. And also, I haven't cut the horizontal pieces for this yet. I have, as you can see, done all the vertical panels, and I want to make sure they fit, of course. But I want to take the measurements for the horizontals off of the actual project itself. I mean, I could have done this, just by taking measurements and doing it that way, but I find that this is just a good idea, just to make sure that everything's square and sliding in properly. And also, you're going to see here as I do this, I initially put the drawers in the wrong way, but again, this is also, like I said, a test setup, just making sure that everything fits where it should fit, and making sure everything is square. That's what this is all about. And also, I was working through in my head as I was doing this, thinking about how I'm going to do the glue up, because this is, again, a lot more panels to juggle than I'm used to. So you can see here what I'm doing here right now is I'm just taking a square piece of one of the offcuts, and I'm just taping it to the back, give it a bit of rigidity so I can have a look at it. And also on the table, you can see there, that is the piece that I was doing all the test cuts on, making sure, of course, each of the rabbets was where I want it to be before I cut one of these more important pieces. So there you go. That's as much as I need to do on that. Wanted to have a look at it, make sure everything fits, and as you can see here as we pan down, I had to take these out and reorient them, because the panel on the right obviously needs to be rotated 180, and then here we go. This is where it should be now. This is, as you see, all the slots line up, and as we pan over here, that's the bottom one, and exceptionally large middle one. We'll figure that out. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Again, as I said earlier, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about whether there should be a drawer there or a shelf. Definitely, actually, wait till after part 2, because you'll see all the drawers in place and how it looks that way. So now I just need to, while this is all nice and solidly taped up, well, modestly solid, I'm just going to use this to give me a nice, make sure the dimension's perfect, that all of them slide in easily, and then I'll take my measurement off of that, of course, and set up my saw blade for this. And then, of course, here they all are. It's just a simple matter of sliding these in. Again, this is just a test fit. I'm just going to slide them in, make sure everybody goes in, and of course I'm thinking as I'm doing this how I want to do the glue up, because which drawers to start with, or sorry, which slides to start with. These are where the drawers are going to fit in these little cubbies, and I just want to make sure that, well, first off, that they all went in, and I didn't have any issues with squareness. You see some of them are quite nice and snug, and there you can see much more clearly the larger central chamber. But I don't know, I haven't really come to a conclusion myself on that, what to do. It's not really that important, I suppose, but it is something I will have to come to grips with. And as you can see, there's an awful lot of stuff I need to arrange and for the glue up, which I need to do all at once. The reason being that these slots they're not tight, but once the glue goes on them and it starts to set a little bit, it's going to be very difficult to manipulate this. So I want, like I said, put it together as quickly as possible. And so what you see here is I'm adding glue to all the top panel and the bottom panel, messing up a little bit with a paintbrush to make sure it's all even. And then I'm going to put in all the verticals, tape all that in place, And then after I make sure everything's relatively square and everything's where I want it to be, I am going to start sliding in all the drawers. Now obviously I can't, sorry, not the drawers, but the supports for the drawers. So like I said, this has to go together quite quickly. And because I am dividing up the gluing, because I didn't want the glue to start to skin, I am not going to glue the slots for the horizontals. I am going to glue the actual slot, the actual panels themselves that are going to slide in here. That way, I'll get a lot of squeeze out, I suppose, as these go in. But I was doing this part here, and I was realizing they go in quite well, so I wasn't too concerned. Of course, the major concern here is this was to make sure that I put them in the proper order. You can see there I'm taping on that little square piece of wood in the back temporarily, just to get this all lined up. And then, like I said, I'm going to run the glue along these and slide them each in, and that it actually went together pretty good. The other thought I was having as I was doing this is to do this this flipped on its back, but I didn't really want to go that route because I may end up with a lot of glue running down the back of this and having issues with it, you know, clumping up there. This way it slides off, as you can see, squeezes out, I should say, and I just wipe it off. It was fine. There was no real issues working with this at all. I mean, I had no problems putting it together. Some of it, as you can see, is a little bit off screen because I didn't set up the camera properly. But you get the idea. I mean, just watching the ones I am doing, it's all the same. It's just rinse and repeat. And like I said, didn't have any difficulty with it. The only problem I ran into, or sorry, I should say not so much of a problem, but I made a bit of a mistake when I was clamping this up because I wanted to make sure it was all tight. I ended up putting clamps straight onto the 1/4 inch, and what I should have done instead was cut some strips of like maybe 3/4 inch just to spread the force out a little bit. Because I did notice after everything was glued and dried and set and I took all the tape off and everything else, there's one or two spots that I can just, if I looked at it, or I should say held up a straight edge to it, that I can spot a little bit of a curve. It wasn't exactly as straight as I would like. Not really a big deal. But in hindsight, if I had it to do again, I would definitely use something more rigid to spread the force out. Just because, something to keep in mind when I do this, if I do this again. So here you go. It's just a matter of clamping it now. You're going to see as I clamp it, it's going to deflect things a little bit, but I'm going to make sure it's good and square. And in the next video, I am going to make all the drawers. And the other thing about doing this, and the thing that always gets me when I put these sorts of things together, acrylic is much faster to work with. This video, just a video recording itself, was probably about half hour, just the recording part, and it took obviously a few hours to put together. The drawers go together so much faster, each one like a minute or two to glue up. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and bye for now.